Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of three Psalms Psalm 23, Psalm 90, and Psalm 103. The way they connect together, the way they connect David and Moses together. And we're in our study of Psalm 90. Last time we were together, we looked at Psalm 90 and Psalm 23 and noticed already connections and then glaring differences. We noticed the connection in that both Psalm 23 and Psalm 90 begin with a single line that expresses the faith of the author. In David, Psalm 23, the opening line, "The Lord is my shepherd. I know who takes care of me and who cares for me and who is invested in my well-being, and it's God. And Moses, the guy who never had a real home that was his, says this: Yahweh, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. As long as I have God, I have a home. I know where I belong. I belong to God. I belong in God. But immediately we saw the differences. Whereas David looks forward into the future and stares right at the valley of the shadow of death, but he's not afraid when he sees it because he knows God is with him. And he looks forward beyond that to the eternity that he gets to spend in God's household with God. But with Moses, it's none of that. We are mortal. We are temporary. Death is a terminus. And that's what is going to be true for Moses as we read this passage. Let's go ahead and read it and just talk about the impressions that we get from looking at these 17 verses. We know this psalm so well, whether we realize we do or not, because almost every line is a quotable that we know. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust, and say, Return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday, when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away with the flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins, in the light of your presence. For all our days pass under your wrath. We bring our years to an end with a sigh. The years of our life are 70, 70, the King James says, or even by reason of strength 80. Yet their span is full of toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger, your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad in all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. There is a hope. There is a prayer for mercy. But death is a terminus, and he doesn't see beyond our own death other than the establishing the work of our hands so that our children can see it and see your goodness. He really can't see past the next generation or two. And hoping that what the good that we've done in this life survives to bless our children. He doesn't even mention our grandchildren, but survives to bless our children. Um, there's a different outlook altogether. But we'll see in Psalm 23, Psalm 103, that David absolutely accepts the same set of facts that Moses presents in Psalm 103. But just let's talk about tone for a minute. David sees himself as in the tender care of God. Moses sees himself standing before a God who is wrathful, and for good reason, because we have public sins and we have secret sins, and they are great, and God is wonderful, and we have no right to stand before him at all, and yet we do. And when we think about the two men and the lives that they led, David found out he was special before God when he was a boy. Um, And even though he had hardship, God continued to bless him, protect him, lead him, feed him, all those things that he says in Psalm 23, year after year after year, until he established his kingdom and became the greatest king, most powerful king that they had ever had, that they will ever have in some ways, until his sin with Bathsheba and when he blew up his own life. And even then he knew God was continuing to be with him and to forgive him. Um, and so we understand why David's own life experience, especially his formative years, lead him to this outlook, to see himself as someone tenderly cared for by God. Moses, however, you know, ha- had to face down Pharaoh, had to stand before the chariots approaching them on one side with the Red Sea at their back, and the grumbling of God's people day after day after day after day, and then to have to defend these people before God multiple times. Um, it's a different experience altogether. It just is. And it shapes their outlook. And so both these psalms are expressions of the men themselves, um, and yet they don't disagree with each other on the basic facts of human existence. Um, I want us to notice that in this psalm, and we need to establish this set of facts that he's working with as we start to look at the text next time. The, the set of facts that he's presenting is that we are mortal. God's eternal, but we are mortal. There's an expiration date on human life, and it's 70 years, maybe 80 years, which is interesting because Moses lived to be 120. But we see that a human lifespan, even to this day, a human lifespan is between 70 and 80 years if you get good nutrition and good health care. It just is. And so he's pointed that out. Um, Humans are imperfect. In fact, they're beyond imperfect. They're deeply flawed and rebellious before God. And we have public sins and secret sins, and they're all an affront to God and a betrayal of His goodness that He's already shown to us. That we are sinful most of the time, and that all of this sin exists in God's presence and is an affront to God's presence and brings about necessary consequences because it is sin. Now, those are the facts as Moses presents them. As we look at the text next time, we'll talk about how he applies that set of facts. And then we'll see in Psalm 103 David take the same set of facts and apply them in a different way. We'll pick up with the text next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.